Welcome to Focus on the Future. Today, we're going to discuss credit scores, how they are derived, and how to make sure your credit score stays as high as possible. It's hard to imagine that someone you don't even know can judge your character by looking at a 3-digit number you may not even know how it came to be. Your FICO score is that number, and it can determine if you'll get the loan you want, be able to purchase a vehicle, get insurance, or even land a great job. Our guest today is a credit expert who will help us unlock the mystery of the FICO score and answer our many questions about credit. Please help us welcome Ms. Karen Bernhardt from Money Management International to Focus on the Future. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Skip. How are you?
I'm terrific. How are you doing? Thanks for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Always
My
a pleasure to talk with you. Tell us just a little bit about your background and what you do and Money Management International.
What I do at Money Management International is I am a regional director of education, and so I teach financial education classes to groups and nonprofit groups, community groups, school groups, any group who needs financial education, and that's just about everybody.
How long have you been doing that?
I have been doing that since 2002.
Ah, okay.
Long time.
Quite a ways.
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's start with just a basic question. What the heck is FICO? Because I just referred to that in my introduction. What does it mean?
FICO stands for Fair Isaacson Company, and that is the first company that came up with a scoring model to take the information from someone's credit report and translate that into a 3-digit number, which is basically a snapshot of a person's credit worthiness.
Now, when you say snapshot, you mean just at any given point in time?
At any given point in time, because the FICO score can change on a daily basis.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting. Well, I kind of want to get into that as we progress, but let me ask first of all, when you say FICO score, is it, and I said it was a 3-digit number, was that right?
It is. You are right, and it ranges anywhere from 300 to 850, and the lower being the worst and the higher being the best.
What are the implications of a low score, high score? I mean, does it really matter?
It really matters, and it is mattering more and more it seems like on a daily basis. It matters, of course, to if you're applying for a loan and you need to borrow money for something, it will determine, first of all, whether or not you get the loan, and then it will also determine what interest rate you will pay on the loan. And the interest rate, of course, translates into big bucks. If you are paying back a loan over time, the interest is charged on the outstanding balance, and that can add up to thousands and thousands of dollars, depending on the interest rate.
Especially on a home mortgage that would run for 30 years.
Yes.
A couple of points difference in interest rate
huge.
Does amount to could amount to tens of thousands of dollars.
It does. Absolutely.
So
it impacts your pocketbook. It also can impact your ability to get a job. Employers are now looking at credit scores, and that is playing a part in their determination whether they hire you or not.
You know, you're right. In fact, I saw an article just the other day as I was going through the internet that I do occasionally, and this article talked about the fact that many employers, like 35%, will actually base their decision to hire or not hire you based on your credit score.
Right. And of course, the credit score, again, is reflective of the information on a credit report.
Now, these credit reports are generated by whom?
By the three big ones that just about everybody uses are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, and those are the credit bureaus.
Right.
And of course, the credit bureaus, they get their information from, personal information comes from the consumer when they fill out an application. The creditors are also reporting to the credit bureaus, although they don't all report to all three necessarily. And then the last source of information from the credit bureaus is public records. And it's financial public records, which would include judgments, liens, bankruptcy.
So all that stuff is reported to the credit bureaus, and then they
the credit
put this into some kind of crunching system and come out with the score.
With the number, right, which again is the snapshot.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Now, A couple of questions before we get into how the score is derived and perhaps how you maintain a good score. First question, how old do you have to be before you get a credit score?
18.
Okay.
18 is the magic age where the credit bureaus actually will report whatever information is out there. There may be information out there prior to when a person turns 18 if they were, for instance, on their parents' credit card or something like that, or if they had actually defaulted on any financial obligation and it went to collections. They could actually have a collection account before they're 18 that might be out there, but it wouldn't be reported by the credit bureau until they're 18.
But then it shows up.
Then it shows up.
So it is possible to foul up your credit before you ever turn 18.
Yes, and before you ever access a loan.
Really?
Yes, I mean if you have a contractual obligation to pay, for instance, on a cell phone.
Right.
And you don't pay it, or medical, and
Okay.
you don't pay it. And then they try to collect and they're not able to, and then it goes to collections. That
It could even be something as simple as an electric bill, right?
it could, absolutely, a utility, or a lease on an apartment. Anything that is not paid and goes to collections will end up on a credit report.
And it's going to show up eventually. You can't escape it.
That's right.
So your advice would be then, even if you're under 18, you
pay
better
your bills.
realize.
Pay your bills. You know, if you have a bill that any bills need to be paid, and of course they need to be paid on time.
Makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
Now, you and I have talked before, and you've told me that there are 5 elements that make up this credit score that FICO uses.
Yes.
Can we talk about what those 5 are?
We certainly can. And again, this is broad strokes, and within these 5 factors, depending on the type of loan someone might be applying for, there are nuances, and certain things might be weighted differently depending on the industry.
Okay.
Credit card versus mortgage versus car payment, for instance.
So it's the type of loan that you're applying for that will also be a factor?
That will make, yes.
Okay.
And so, but knowing the 5 big factors will definitely tell somebody how to take care of their credit score and the information on their credit report.
Okay.
So, of those 5, let's start with the biggest one first. The biggest one, 35% basically of your score, will be based on payment history.
Okay,
So
what do you mean payment history?
that means whether or not the bill is paid on time.
Okay.
Have you paid as agreed, and have you paid on time?
So if my due date on a bill is, say, October the 15th, and I pay it on the 18th,
that most likely will not show up on your credit report, although it could show up as a late payment. But typically, unless it's a month late, it won't show up as a late payment on a credit report. Although, if you pay late, even by a day, whoever you're paying will no doubt charge you a late fee. And so even if it doesn't affect your credit score, it's going to affect your pocketbook, so you want to get those bills paid on time.
And those late fees can be as much as $35,
Oh, or
$40 bucks.
even more than that.
Really?
If it's on rent, for instance, or a mortgage payment, yes, it can be even more.
Wow.
A lot.
That amount to a lot
That
of
could
money.
be a lot of money.
Do that every month, you're paying a little extra, aren't
if you do that every month, you pay more than you have to. And if you do it on 4 or 5 bills, you could be spending hundreds of dollars on late fees, which is not helping you at all.
Number 1, pay your bills on time.
Pay your bills on time.
And you say that's 35% of the score.
35% of the score, biggest chunk, biggest piece of the pie.
What's second?
The second biggest piece of the pie is the outstanding balance someone has on their loan amount and compared to how much they could borrow. And this is a ratio, a debt ratio.
Okay.
And the lower the better. So in other words, if someone opens a credit card and the limit on the credit card, say, is $5,000.
Okay.
If they ran right out to the mall and spent $5,000, they would have a 100% ratio. That would lower their score considerably.
How much would it lower the score? Do you know?
Well, it would depend on each individual, and how much a score is lowered. But again, 30% of the credit score is based on the balance, outstanding balance, that debt ratio.
So we're now at 65% of
Right.
the score, paying your bills on time, and then that
Right.
ratio. Well, let me ask a question about the ratio, because this comes up a lot.
Yes.
Say I have one credit card, I owe, let's just go back to your example, a $5,000 credit line.
Right.
I owe $2,500 on the card, so I have a 50-50 ratio.
50% ratio.
What if I go out and apply for 3 or 4 more cards, all with $5,000 limit, but I don't use them? Let's say I get an additional $20,000 worth of credit. That changes my ratio.
It does.
Does that raise my score?
It does.
Wow.
Absolutely. The outstanding balances on revolving accounts are compared to the total amount of credit available.
So one way perhaps then to raise your credit score, if you've got a lousy one, would be to apply for more credit. That seems to be counterintuitive almost.
Well, and of course, if you, credit should never be applied for unless you are sure you're going to be able to repay it and repay it on time.
Right.
So, you know, to go out if you've got a bad credit score and just going out opening new accounts, that might, you know, may or may not help on that particular thing. But there are other things to consider in the score. And a little 10% sliver of the score is actually the inquiries on your credit report, which are whenever you apply for new credit. And so whenever you do apply for new credit, your score is going to come down just a little bit every time you apply, whether you get the credit or not.
Now, I've
Only
heard,
10%.
Well, I've heard that your score drops 5 points for every application that you make. Is that a myth or is that true?
The amount that it would drop of that 10% out of the whole pie is going to be different for each individual.
So you can't really apply a number to it.
No, you can't.
Well, let me
not
ask
specific.
a little follow-up question on that then. I understand that if I'm looking for, let's say, a vehicle,
Yes.
and I go out and I shop for a vehicle, and at each dealership they ask for my credit information, and I go ahead and provide that for them. Does that lower my score each time that I do that, or is there a window of opportunity where it only lowers it once?
Used to be it would lower it each time, but now with the new scoring models, it is supposed to be giving you only one inquiry when you're shopping for a car or a mortgage, at least within a 2-week period.
Oh, so it's a 14-day window then? Well, that's nice to know, because
Yes.
you know, I just can't make a decision in 24 hours at one car dealership.
Right.
If I'm shopping for a car, I'm going to look at several different.
And even if you go to one dealership, if you give them your information and are applying for a loan through them, they will send that out to any number of different lenders to
really?
try.
Oh, so we can shop the loan prices as well.
Right.
That's
Right.
interesting.
And you should actually do that before you walk into the dealer if you're buying a car.
Well, that's a different show, I think.
Yes, I think so. That's a whole different show.
And that is something we will discuss with our car dealer coming up later in this in this semester.
Yes.
All right. So let's see. We're at 35, 30, 10. What's left?
What's left? 15% of the total scoring model is based on how long you have accessed credit and have a history.
Okay.
And so in this case, the longer your credit history, the higher your score goes.
But that only starts at age 18. The stuff that I did when I was 15, cell phones, et cetera, that could hurt my score are not going to help me
They're not going to help you, but they definitely will hurt you.
if I haven't paid those
Absolutely.
bills.
Yes, when we're talking credit history, we're talking about open accounts and and how long you've had the accounts open, and you're demonstrating your use and hopefully wise use of credit. And the longer that wise use of credit goes on, the higher your score goes. And so your score is changing every time something on your credit, the information on your credit bureau changes, that changes your score.
Well, I can imagine that it's got to be a little bit frustrating for a young person, 18 to let's say 25. They don't have a credit history to speak of. How many years does it take before that 15% begins to help you?
Well, it begins to help on a monthly basis, but usually, 6 months to a year to, and again, then the longer it goes, the more help you'll get from that little 15%.
Well, that makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. All right, so we've talked about 4 elements. What's the 5th?
The 5th is another little 10% sliver of the pie, and that is based on the types of credit you have accessed. And the 2 types that the credit bureaus are looking at are revolving, which would be like a credit card or a line of credit, where you can, you have a limit and you could borrow money and pay it back and borrow more money and pay it back. It revolves. And then the second type is called installment, and that would be an example of, for instance, a car loan or a home loan, where you borrow a big chunk of money, you make a certain payment over a certain period of time in an installment manner, and in order to get the most out of that little 10% sliver, the credit bureaus would like to see both types of credit on your credit report. And so when a young person is initially starting to access credit and build their credit score, it's not going to be an overnight process. They're not going to necessarily have a car payment or a house payment in the beginning.
Right.
They may just have a revolving account or accounts. But over time, most people will have both types, and that will help their score.
Okay, so when you start talking about mortgages, et cetera, that is an installment loan. And then just a normal credit card would be a revolving.
A revolving.
Account. Why do they call it revolving? What does that mean?
Well, the revolving part is that, within a certain limit, you could borrow money, repay the money, borrow it again, and repay it again for as long as you wanted to do that.
Okay. Let me do a little follow-up here just to make sure I understand this. There are those 5 elements, and they are again?
They are payment history,
right?
Debt ratio,
okay.
The balances on the accounts,
right?
Keep them low,
okay.
Length of credit history, inquiries whenever you apply for credit, and types of credit, either installment or revolving.
I gotcha. Now, one more question about this before we leave this score.
Okay.
And that is that I've heard that if I pay off my credit cards every month and don't carry a balance, that hurts my score. Is that true?
That is not true. As a matter of fact, the wisest way to use a credit card, if you're using it simply for convenience and not to purchase something you don't have money to pay for, is to only put on a credit card the amount that you can pay off in full when the bill comes due.
Well, that makes absolute sense to me, because credit card interest is pretty high, isn't it?
Credit card interest is going to be high for a young person first accessing credit,
right?
Because they don't know what the person is going to do with it, and so they are going to charge a higher interest rate. But a young person could get a credit card, for instance, even if it had a very high interest rate, and pay absolutely no interest on it, if they only put on the credit card however much they could pay off in full the following month when they get their bill.
Makes sense.
No interest.
One last quick question, because we're about to run out of time here.
Okay.
Where do I go to get my free credit report? And
Your free credit report, yes, every 12 months, everyone is entitled to one free credit report every year. Annualcreditreport.com.
Okay.
Or there is a toll-free number which will be shown at that internet site too. You could call, or you could actually write to the credit bureaus.
Now, I won't get my credit score when I
You will not get the
report.
credit score unless you pay for the credit score. That's extra.
How much does that cost?
Usually $5.95 to $7.95. They each one charge a little bit different.
And probably not important unless you're going to go get a loan.
Not necessarily. Everybody kind of would like to know their score.
Sure.
But the important part is what is on the credit report, and is it correct? And if it isn't, the person needs to dispute the information with the credit bureau, and they can do that for free. They don't need a lawyer, don't need to go to a credit repair place, and correct the information.
Good to know. Karen, thank you so much for being with us today. Great information.
You are welcome. Thank you, Skip.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Well, I thought that was a great interview. What did you get from it?
Well, there's a couple things that Karen left me with that I was really thinking about that I want to make sure that our students understand. Your credit score can range from 300 to 850, and you want to be on the higher side.
Yeah, definitely, because if you're not on the higher side, you're going to pay a lot higher interest rates.
It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you in employment. It's going to cost you in housing. It's going to cost you in interest on your credit card. You're talking about a lot of money potentially here. So you want to make sure that you are managing your credit score, your credit report wisely.
You know, there's one other thing that's going to cost you we didn't talk about, and that's an insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Believe it or not, people get turned down for insurance because their credit score's lousy.
That's true. The bottom line, protect your credit score, protect your credit report. It's going to help you in the long run.
You know, speaking of credit reports, there is one place you can go and only one place to get that free credit report.
Where's that?
That would be myannualcreditreport.com, or drop the I think it's just annualcreditreport.com now.
Yeah, and you can check that out on our resources tab on focusonthefuture.tv.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing you next week. What's next?
Next, we have Budget Busters and then the Stock Market Corner. Thanks, guys. Hi, welcome back. This week, we're staying with the basics. One of the biggest bites out of our income every month is the housing expense. No question that shelter is a basic need, but how much we spend on housing can make or break our budget. Most of us will start out by living in housing where we pay rent. This might be an apartment, single-family home, trailer, even a duplex. What you choose will be based on your individual preference and your needs. It would be great to start out your working life with a new home you own. But given the recent housing bubble and the subsequent restrictions on qualifying for a mortgage, that won't be realistic for most of us. As long as we live within our budget and save money each month, we'll soon be able to accumulate enough money for a down payment on a home of our very own. So how much should you spend on rent? Well, that's going to depend on several different variables. First, the city in which you choose to live will determine how much rent you'll have to pay. Second, the type of housing you choose will also have an impact on the amount of rent you'll pay. One rule of thumb you might follow: don't spend more than 25% of your net income on housing. Wait a minute, you might be thinking, that means that if I make $2,000 per month after taxes and deductions, I can only spend $500 a month on rent. That's right. It's not going to buy you a whole lot in a big city, but you have three choices: get a better job that pays more, get a second job to increase your income, or get a roommate or two to share the expense. That might seem rather harsh to some of you, but the reality is sometimes life can be harsh. If you blow your budget because you have to have a pool or a workout gym in your apartment complex, you're going to have a difficult time making ends meet every single month. And then you can forget about saving money for your own home because you won't be able to do it. So the bottom line is sacrifice a little now with a lower housing expense so that one day you can own your own fabulous home.